I told you to vote for X, and then X says we're cutting funds to Aboriginal services, then I'm the one who kind of almost was responsible for that, and it can get really, really complicated. I think the church maintains its integrity, and I suppose the moral weight of its voice, if it stays outside of the political process, the party political process, and speaks to all the parties and proclaims one single message, which is the message of love and compassion and kindness. So, sorry, well, there's a few hands, so I'll take, I think, Philo's first, and then we'll come back to you. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, yep, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I think I probably sympathise with what you're saying. Look, remember that for the first 300 years of the church was completely outside the government and the politics, right? The church was a persecuted church. Whatever it had to do with the government, mostly it was the government picking on the Christians and making their life miserable. And yet, that was the most powerful phase of the church. That's when Christianity, really spread everywhere. It wasn't by becoming the emperor and enacting laws that they changed the world. They changed the world in that first 300 years by changing individual hearts, by showing people that love is important and that there are more important things than money and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's what the church, that's the ideal of what the church should be like. People disagree with me on what I'm about to say next, so please don't worry if you disagree. You have every right to. But I actually think it was bad for the church when Constantine made Christianity legal, and then within 100 years or so, it actually became the state religion of the Roman Empire. I think in some ways the church benefited a lot, that they could build churches, they could worship in the open, you didn't have to hide your Christianity in your wherever you work, or whoever you work for, or in the army or whatever. Okay, that was all really good. And I think the rule of the empire itself benefited a little bit. Some Christian values began to be implemented in the running of the empire. But I think some of the influence went the other way. And the church started to get corrupted. And the church started to worry about power and position and wealth and protect, The nice thing is when you don't have a church, you're just praying in people's homes, right? Nobody can do anything to you. Once you have a beautiful, big, Sancta Sophia Cathedral, now you have to worry about protecting it, and people may knock down our building and, all that sort of stuff. Okay, which isn't really what Jesus was about, is it? Like, foxes have holes, birds have nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So there is a danger there, isn't there? I mean, it's great that Christianity has a positive influence on government, but I think we have to be really careful that government doesn't have a negative influence on Christianity and takes away the purity of our ideals as Christians. And in a sense, once you're part of that governing structure, you have to toe the line, right? Anyone who joins a political party knows this. Maybe Donald Trump is the exception. Okay, but you join a political party, you've got to follow the party line, even if you don't agree with it, right? If you don't agree with it, you still got to toe the party line because that's how you get stuff done. Well, if you have a Christian conscience, you may not be able to do that. Anyway, I think that's probably okay. We'll take one more on this one, and then we'll move on. Yep. So, how do you mean? Yeah. Well. Yeah. Again, I'm not sure. See, again, this may be way too idealistic, right? But I'm not sure that the most Christian thing to do is to get political when something that concerns you happens, and then when you see your neighbour having bad things happen, you say, well, I don't have to do anything because it's not me. So to me, I mean, if I wanted to stand up and say, we have to protect the right to be Christian, before I do that, I hope I would have first stood up and said, we have to protect the poor and the helpless, like the Aboriginals and the refugees and that sort of thing. Then I think we might have some good ground to stand on. If we watch those people being treated really badly and say nothing, and then someone says to me, you can't say this word in public, and I get really upset about that, there seems to be a kind of a disconnect there. Like, this guy's starving to death or, dying from diabetes, whatever. I just can't say a word. And yet that's what I choose to stand up and make a big fuss about. That doesn't seem to be very consistent to me. Even if it were to happen, and look, it may happen one day, I don't think it will happen in any of our lifetimes in Australia, okay? The big thing in Australia is freedom. Everybody gets to do what they want. So I don't think that will happen. But even if it were to happen, all that means is we go back to the early church situation. That's what made the church strong. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Okay, now I know I said it was the last one, but this is the very, very last one, and then we'll move on. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the average individual person probably won't make much of a difference. A community like the Coptic community in Australia, let's be honest, we're not going to make much of a difference because we're scattered and there's not many of us. And the way you make a difference is you get politicians worried about their next election, right? So we don't really have much power, I agree. But yeah, but I think if you did have the opportunity to make a difference, so maybe if you joined Amnesty International, for example, or something like that, who do have a bit more clout, and you worked, to help them with that, I think that is something that you should do. If you're walking on the street and you saw a little old lady being mugged, I don't think you would say, oh, I just have to pray about it, right? You would be expected to go and do something active. If you walk down the street and you see your Aboriginal brother or sister, being treated really badly or suffering, not on purpose, but suffering in the society that we have, I don't think, if there's something for you that you can do practical, you have to do that. You can't just say, I'm just going to pray about it. And if part of that is political, I mean, I don't think it is. I don't think the solution to the Aboriginal problem is just political. Governments have thrown lots of money at the problem for years, and it hasn't really made much of a difference. I think we need to find better ways. It still needs money, but we need to find better ways to use that money to help them. But something like the refugees and the offshore detention, okay, I have no problem if a country says, if you want to come into the country, you have to do it legally. Okay, don't take the back door, don't jump the queue and all that stuff, that's fine. But then to put people somewhere and lock them up and stop even journalists or members of the public or members of the government or anyone going in to see what's going on there, that's a recipe for disaster. Okay, then you get all the crackpots just doing horrible things to people, knowing that nobody's going to find out what they're doing. And we've seen cases where that's happening. Okay, should we as Christians just see that and say, not my business, or I'll just pray about it? Again, it'll come back to, is there anything I can do that would help or not? I don't know. You have to, that's a good question. I don't know whether you could be effective in what you do. But if enough people actually said, this is bad and it shouldn't happen, then I think that would be a good, positive political sort of change. And notice that has nothing to do with what party is in power, right? Labor did it when they were in power. The Liberals kept doing it. Actually, they started and they continued it afterwards. So that's not a party issue. That's a human rights sort of issue. Yeah. That's true. And sadly, I mean, we're kind of getting off topic a bit. This will be the last comment. Sadly, I think all the people do surveys, and it shows that people have lost faith in the political system and in the politicians, because we don't really have politicians who have really strong ideals these days. I'm sorry to say, or on both sides of politics. I'm old enough to remember, none of you would remember this, but Gough Whitlam. I don't know if you know that name or not. Yeah, he was so passionate, and he really believed in what he was doing, and got into lots of trouble because he was so idealistic and stuck to his ideals. Unfortunately, I wish we had someone like that, but who knows. Let's move on to the next question, shall we? Is it okay to have a drink? Well, I imagine if you're thirsty, you need to drink, don't you? Oh, this is about a different kind of drink. Okay, so I'm guessing this is alcohol. So, interesting results here. The survey says 62% say yes, 13% say no, it's not okay, 24% say maybe. So that interests me. I'm pretty sure you know that it's a fairly consistent teaching in the Coptic Church that you shouldn't drink alcohol. So would anyone like to give points of view one way or the other on this one?
I would say it's okay. And there was something Amr Musa once was saying, and he said, you never trust your limit. Because when a person gets drunk from his funniness, he says, he's going to go and hug the pole as if the pole is his friend.
Okay. I like the pole, Mina. It's very nice. Okay. So, oh yes, go ahead. Okay, so are you saying that, so where would you vote on this? Yes, okay, or maybe? Okay, so you're saying the danger is... Are you saying the danger is a drink will turn into 2 drinks will turn into drunk? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the drink itself is not the problem, it's what may come afterwards that is the problem, and therefore you'd say no. Yeah. Was that a hand? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think we'd all agree that getting drunk is not a good thing. Would anyone want to disagree about that? We are in it's kind of a public sport, a national sport, isn't it? Okay, but I think we'd all, as Christians, we'd kind of see that getting drunk is not a good idea because of the kinds of things that you're talking about, right? That you lose control, you do stupid things that you regret afterwards. Sometimes you hurt people, sometimes you kill people if you get behind the wheel of a car. Okay, and your judgment isn't working properly. And it's not good as a Christian to lose control of your own actions. That's the opposite of what Christ is trying to get us to do. So then I think we have this grey area, which is what about if you do it within limits, as Carlos is saying, so you're not over the legal limit, so you're still in control, you're just feeling a little bit jolly, but that's all. You still know what you're doing, you're not saying stupid things and all that sort of thing. Is that okay? Honestly, my answer is actually a medical one. And I'm pretty sure that the reason... Okay, let me give you a few medical facts, okay? Alcohol is a poison. Get enough of it, it will kill you. And people actually have died from alcohol poisoning. Normally, you don't get to that stage because you pass out before you can drink that last one that's going to kill you. But sometimes if you do it quick enough, or if it's concentrated enough, you can actually kill yourself with alcohol. Number 2, If you walk in, this is a statistic from a while ago, but I doubt it's changed much. If you walk into any hospital ward today and look around you at the people in the beds, 40% of those patients will have some alcohol-induced illness. Now, it may not be the illness for which they came into the hospital, they may have come in for something else, but they will have some kind of illness caused by alcohol. Right? So alcohol damages your body. Now, you've got all these studies that came out and said, oh, but alcohol is good, it stops you having heart attacks and blah, 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 blah. More recently, I've noticed there are now studies coming out saying, but on the other hand, alcohol causes this and that and the other disease, and in the end, we're not really quite sure whether overall it is better for your health to have it or not. If you're pregnant, we certainly know you should not be drinking even one glass at all, okay, because it's going to damage the fetus, it's much more sensitive. But it's also doing damage to your body at a lower sort of level because your body is a bit more robust. And here's the last bit. This is the one that really clinches it for me. And it kind of goes on T's comment a little bit earlier. 1 in 10 social drinkers of alcohol will become alcoholic at some stage in their life. 1 in 10. And the scary thing is there's no correlation with like a particular personality type or a socioeconomic status or anything like that. It's not like if you're smart, you're not going to be the 1 in 10. No, it's averaged across the board. So this is the way I think about it. We as a community, the Coptic Church of Archangel Michael and St. Bishoy Church in Australia, right? We have roughly, I think, about 2,500 people in our congregation. I think we know the names and addresses of about 2,000, right? Let's say 2,000. If we had a policy as a community that drinking alcohol socially, responsibly, not in excess, not getting drunk is okay, that would mean that out of our 2,000 members, 200 of you would one day become alcoholic. 200 people would become alcoholic. And just think about this. It's not just the person who becomes alcoholic whose life is affected. Their family gets affected. They lose their job. They can't look after their kids. Some people turn violent and start beating their family members. So it's not just going to affect 200 people. It's going to affect a lot more people than that. So if you think about it that way, for the 2,000 of us, does it not make sense as a loving act for 9 out of 10 of us to forego the alcohol that's never going to do any damage in my life in order to save the life of the 1 out of 10 for whom it is going to do damage? Okay, that's how I think about it. I'm not saying alcohol is evil, okay, and look, let's be honest, if you go back to the Bible, there's a lot of verses about drunkenness being evil, lots of those verses. I challenge you to find me a verse that says that simply drinking alcohol is evil. Okay, it doesn't. And in fact, there's a passage which, I don't know if I should be telling you this, I probably shouldn't, but there's a little passage, I think, in the Wisdom of Solomon that extols the virtues of drinking alcohol. Right? So please understand, I'm not saying that it is an evil substance and, if you touch it, it'll eat you away or something. Okay, that's not at all what we're saying. But we're saying realistically, and in ancient times, people used alcohol for a lot of stuff we don't use it for today, right? Drink a little wine for your stomach's sake, St. Paul said to St. Timothy, because they didn't have Alka-Seltzer or Gastro, whatever that they have, Gastro-Ease or whatever that we have today. Alcohol is antiseptic, right? So it kills germs. Today we have lots of much better, more effective antiseptics and so on. Today you walk into the supermarket, there is a whole aisle of lovely, tasty drinks of all different kinds of things. Back then it was like alcohol or water, right? And the alcohol was better for you because it killed the germs in the water you were drinking. So there were some pretty good reasons to be drinking alcohol back then, most of which don't apply to us anymore. And yet you have this 1 in 10 of a community that drinks alcohol socially is going to become alcoholic. So, I don't know, that's how I would think of it. Yep.
Is it true that it's Islamic cultural influence on our church?
Yeah, look, I've heard people say the Copts don't drink alcohol because they live in a Muslim country. And that's sort of plausible until you realize that the Syrian Orthodox who also live in a largely Islamic country, they don't have a problem. Like in the Syrian community, they do drink alcohol. So I don't know why that is. I'm not quite sure. It sort of puts a bit of doubt on it. Maybe we just had a more strict kind of Islam in Egypt, but I don't think we did. I don't think Egyptian Muslims are like fairly moderate, or they have been historically. I don't know about the last 10 years. Okay, so sorry, there was a hand here, or it's gone? Yep. Go ahead, Michael. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was for the Nazarites, people like Samson and so on. Well, I think that's a nice way to think about it. If you want to feel that, not want to, if you feel that you have sort of given your life to God as a Christian, not necessarily as a Nazarite or anything, I mean, that's one way to think about it. Yeah, that's a nice motivation, definitely. Yeah. But then you might also have to grow your beard and not cut your hair and things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more thing. So statistically, it says 60%, the majority group don't see an issue with that. Is that because the views of the church haven't really shared commonly? It's different viewpoints?
That's a good question. So the question is, why do we have like 60% of people, of Coptic people, saying that they think that it's okay to drink? I don't know. I don't think it's for lack of like the message getting out. I've heard lots of priests and servants saying it. I've read lots of articles. I don't know. Is that different? Have you guys like been told this? Is it something you've been told but you just sort of don't agree with it, or is it something that you've never been told in the first place? So like, we're just pondering why 60% of Coptic people have thought it was okay to drink alcohol. So is it because nobody told you it was bad, or is it because someone told you but it wasn't convincing, or I don't know? Which of those is it? Yeah. Okay, so you're saying people who say yes, what they're actually saying is it's lawful, but I probably wouldn't drink myself, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that would be a reasonable sort of approach. Look, I mean, to be total disclosure here, when I was before I was a priest, when I was working and a student and stuff, sometimes I'd be invited out to the pub with my friends and so on. But to be honest with you, I'd go and I'd just sit there and I'd join in with all the friends and everything and have an orange juice. And occasionally someone would sort of say, why aren't you drinking properly and all that sort of stuff? And I'd say, I just don't like to drink, thanks. It's okay. You have your drink and I'll have my orange juice. And to be honest, I never really had a problem. I mean, I think, again, that's one of the nice things about Australia, right? If you want to drink and get yourself blind drunk, for Australians, that's okay. If you want to not ever drink alcohol, for Australians, that's okay. No, it's all right. You get to be yourself. So we should use that as Christians. Be yourself. Okay, shall we move on to the next one? Ooh, this is an even more controversial one. Is it okay to vote yes for homosexuality? Now, let me... Okay, I'm going to interpret these... this responses a little bit, okay? The way this is phrased is actually not what we are going through today in Australia. Nobody is voting on the rightness or wrongness of homosexuality, right? And if that was happening, I would be horrified. That shouldn't happen, right? Imagine if they voted on, if we asked Australia, as Myrna was saying earlier, right? Let's have a vote in Australia on the rightness or wrongness of Christianity, right? Would that be okay? That would be horrible, okay? I'm sorry, you don't get to tell me whether I can be Christian or not. That's something that's between me and God, right? So, what we are having in Australia today is a vote on same-sex marriage and whether it should be legal. So it's not a value judgment on homosexuality. It's about how should our society run? What is the way that, what should people be able to do in our society? So the answers, I should have said the answers, to this question, is it okay to vote yes to homosexuality? Only 20% said yes, 80% said no. I probably, my answer is we should never have a country vote on homosexuality any more than we should have a country vote on Christianity, right? That's not up to us, okay? That's a personal and ethical sort of issue, not a political issue. I have a suspicion if the question had been worded as, is it okay in the current survey for a Christian to vote yes to same-sex marriage? I don't know if the figures would have been different or not. I'm not quite sure. Would anyone like to venture an opinion before I venture mine? You're all being really shy on this one. You're going to make me give my opinion. Oh, I think that's hardly fair. Look, when people have asked me, I've told them very honestly, I think that it is possible to vote yes on Christian grounds, and it is possible to vote no on Christian grounds. And I think on both sides, people are acting with very good intentions and with the best of will, and they're just applying Christian principles from different points of view, okay? So I think the person who votes no is worried about the general trend of society, that morals in general in society are being gradually eroded. First we had divorce being made legal, like no-fault divorce, and then we had de facto relationships being made legal, and that's, I think some Christians feel that that's sort of eroding the Christian values of our society. And I can really understand that, and I can really respect that. And I think, that's lovely that you care about those values. But I think it is also possible as a Christian to say, like we were saying before, church is one thing, government is another thing. And we have to be really careful about confusing those two things. And what this vote is about is not the sacrament of marriage, the Christian sacrament of marriage. It's about a legal contract of marriage. And I think a Christian can say that, as Myrna was saying before, I as a Christian want to live my life and have my community live our lives in a particular way. But if other people are not Christian and they don't share the same foundation and values, it's not really for me to force them to live according to my values. If they want to live according... Okay, maybe I don't like their values, maybe I wish their values would be different. The way to do that is not by changing the law, the way to do that is by changing hearts. It's to win them to Christ and let them themselves realise what is good and bad, and then it comes from within rather than being enforced from without. So I'm just trying to paint a picture for you there of how it is possible to be a sincere Christian who is acting out of Christian principles and yet feel that the right vote here would be yes rather than no. So I'm glad there's a few hands now, so it's not just me talking. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. 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 Look, I agree with you. Can I say, if this was a vote about making it compulsory for churches to conduct same-sex marriages, I would be really upset and I'd be very cranky about that. No, it is not. And I'll tell you why. Because so far as the government of Australia is concerned, church marriage doesn't exist. They have nothing to do with it, right? It's just something that we do in church, and the government doesn't have anything to do with what we do in church. When you came to get married, right, what did you have to do? You had to fill in one set of paperwork for the government and then another set of paperwork for the church. Only the government one got actually sent in. The church one has nothing to do with the government, right? If you had not done the church one at all, in the eyes of the government, you are exactly the same. You are married. If you had done the church one, but not the government one, in the eyes of the government, you are not married. So the government of Australia has nothing to do with church weddings. Now, people, just to preempt some questions, people have brought up examples in England and Denmark, I think, and so on, where there were cases that tried to force churches to conduct same-sex marriages. What you have to understand there is that in England and Denmark in particular, the church is a part of the government, right? So in England, the Church of England is called the Established Church. Who is the head of the Church of England? Who is it? The Queen. Is the Queen a priest or a bishop or anything? She's the Queen, right? If you work for the Queen and the Queen makes a law, you have to follow the law, right? And the same goes in Denmark. In a lot of those Scandinavian countries, I actually researched this to make sure I'm not telling you rubbish, and it is true, right? The church in Denmark, I can't remember what it's called, the Free Lutheran Church or something like that, is actually part of it's under the government. The government pays money to the church so that it can conduct its activities and so on. And once again, if the government makes a law and you're an employee of the government and you don't implement the law the government made, of course you can be taken to court and be asked to, do what the government said you should. Australia is totally different. The government has nothing to do with the church. Not only that, all of the bills that have been proposed, which I wish had just been, implemented and we didn't have to go through all this, they all have really strong protections for religious liberty, okay? We would have to change those in order to force a church to conduct a same-sex marriage. Yep. Look, that's happening already without the politics. There are some churches that conduct same-sex marriages, but that's not because of any, it's not someone told them to do it. They just changed their views on things and they decided it was okay to do that. They're the churches that have, gay and lesbian priests and bishops and all that sort of stuff, okay? Now, that's up to them. I don't see that ever happening. Do you think our church would ever do that? Make a deal with the government and say we're going to do same-sex marriages to get something else? I don't think so. And even if it was, I don't think legalising, making it legal, is going to change that, whether that would happen or not. I don't think. It's really a survey about nothing, because really on both sides, nothing really that much is going to change. There's a few legal things that are going to change. There are, those stories of someone, a partner died and then the partner wasn't allowed to come to the funeral because they're not married, even though they were in a civil union and all that sort of stuff. Maybe a few of those things will change, but they're not huge things. They're small things. Anyway, sorry, there were other hands. I should stop talking. Someone else had a hand? Yes, go ahead. After Mark. Yes. There are actually also, as far as I know, in the bills that were drafted, there are conditions that say that the celebrants, like the legal celebrants, like Abuna Gabriel, can refuse to do it for someone, but I think he has to refer you to someone else who will do it for you, or something like that. Okay, and that's fine. And look, if the worst came to the worst, right, and they said, if you want to be a legal celebrant, you have to do same-sex marriages, all we would do is all the priests who have that would just give it up. Australia is actually quite unusual. In most of the countries in Europe, priests are not civil celebrants because the government doesn't allow them to be. So you actually, if you're getting married in a lot of countries in Europe, you have to go to the registry office or whatever government office it is, do your civil wedding, and then you come to church and Abuna just does your church wedding. Australia's kind in that it makes things easier for couples, so you don't have to do the 2 trips. It lets priests also do the civil thing. That's nice. But it's a luxury, right? If we ever, for ethical or moral reasons, if we ever had to give it up, it's not the end of the world. Why not? Being persecuted for your faith, what's wrong with that? Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Look, that's a really good point you bring up. And I have to tell you, one of the things that we also need to keep in our minds in all of this, again, statistically speaking, roughly 5% of any population is going to be not heterosexual, gay, lesbian, whatever all the other varieties are. And that means that, again, out of 2,000 people here, what's that, 5%? Roughly 100 people out of our community will have a non-heterosexual orientation. Very rough figures. And I know that's the case because I talk to some of them in confessions and so on, okay? And I have to tell you, I just want you, just for a minute, okay, leave aside all the politics and all of that stuff and just do a little mind experiment with me. Imagine if that was you and you were in the Coptic church and you had all these people saying all these really strong things, against homosexuality. How are you feeling now? And sorry? Yeah, look. Yeah. Even if you think that you should vote no, right? And there are lots of gay people who think you should vote no to this for various reasons. But we have to realize these are real human beings who are struggling with something within them. And it's really hard for them to feel that like a large number of people are just really aggro against that thing that they're struggling with. I can tell you, more than one psychologist friend of mine has said to me they have been inundated with gay clients dealing with the emotional stress that all of this discussion has caused them, like just going on in the media and stuff like that. Not Coptic people, like generally. It's really, really hard. So how well do we cater for non-heterosexual people in the Coptic Church? Can I ask you, if one of your friends, if you one day discovered that they were gay, let me just ask you a really honest question. What would you do? Sorry? Try and help them out? What's helping them out is the question. How would you help them out? Can I, sorry, while you're thinking about it, because you're putting him on the spot. He hasn't thought about it yet, so you've got to think about it a bit. Okay, can I tell you a story I just recently heard from a guy in the Uniting Church, right? And he used to be in a Pentecostal church, one of the happy clappers, Very evangelical, very gospel-based and so on. And apparently this guy was the leader of the musical group, and he was a preacher, and he organised all kinds of things, like he was really, really involved in this Pentecostal church. And he was gay. And he got to the stage one day where he finally kind of let people know that he's gay. And he says, this is what happened. After me being like right in there in the church, they sent me a letter in the middle of the week saying, please do not come to church this Sunday. We do not want you. Okay. He said he was really upset by that. And then he said 2 weeks later, he got another letter that said, clearly you haven't changed your mind. We never want to see you again. Never set foot in this church again. Okay. Obviously they were hoping the first letter would like shock him and he'd come back and say, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm going to change or whatever. Okay. Now, I don't think any of you guys would do that. I don't think our priests would do that. Okay. I think we have a much more compassionate sort of approach. But even with our best efforts to try and be compassionate, it's really hard to put yourself in that other person's position and understand what they're going through. I don't know what you read, but it's not a choice that people make for themselves. We don't know where it comes from. It's probably a mixture of your genes and your upbringing and your experiences. We don't really quite know. there's lots of different answers to that. What I do know from all of the gay people that I've spoken to, which is not a small number, nobody wakes up one morning and makes a lifestyle choice and says, yesterday I was going for the Swans, today I'm going to be gay. Okay. I don't think that happens. It's very unusual if it does. Okay, it just doesn't. This is something, and look, and the other thing to keep in mind is, let's be really honest with each other. All of us are struggling with our sexuality. Even the heterosexual people are struggling with their sexuality in different ways, and it's different from one person to another, but we're all struggling with it. I don't have the answer. I don't have the solution. So unfortunately, if you ask me the question, I don't have the answer either. I'm still thinking about it and trying to understand it better and read about it and talk to people and try and find a way. What I will say is I don't think what we do for gay Copts at the moment is good enough. I don't think we're serving them well. I think they're afraid. I think they're under a lot of stress and a lot of tension. And with the best of our intentions, whatever we're doing, it's not really helping them to find a way through that. And I wish that all of us would pray and think together to try and find a way to do it better. So sorry, Philo, you're going to say something. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that's one way that if you're gay, that you sort of maintain your Christianity and live a good life, is to live a celibate life. And I think if you're capable of doing that, that's probably a great blessing, and that's a wonderful thing. But you also know that in our church we teach that celibacy is a gift. It's not something that everybody can do. And if you're not given that gift, but you happen to be gay, then you're still stuck. So you're right, it is a solution for some people, but I don't think it's a solution for all people who are gay. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah. Look, to be honest with you, I think that boat sailed a long time ago. Homosexuality has become acceptable in Australia a long time ago. Look, civil unions are legal, right? And they have been for a long time. And they have all those legal ramifications that go through. I don't know that something like same-sex marriage is actually going to change that. I think issues like education in schools and stuff, I think that's an issue in itself, apart from same-sex marriage, that needs to be addressed, and we need to think about how to address it and so on. And I don't think it's as simple as sometimes people make it out to be. I think it's actually quite complicated. Because in the same class, you may have a child who comes from a family with same-sex parents, right? So if you're going to, say things like, oh, this is horrible and they're all going to hell, you have to think about the little 5-year-old kid who's sitting in front of you being told that their parents are going to hell.